Well, Courtney, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and a friend of Craig's is a friend of mine. And it just so happens that you and I are aligned on so many things, including our Silicon Valley sales experience.
Yes, indeed we are. Yes.
Lord have mercy. Yeah, like that life is over for me. Are you all done with it too?
I've pretty much wiped my hands of it. I recognize that it's not good for my my soul or anything else in my life. So I've sort of walked away.
So were you doing
it drains everything out of me. So
I feel you on that one. I was so grateful I got laid off last December. You know, what was funny is my laptop password was new job 2020. And I got laid off in December of 2020. So I manifested the shit out of that.
Yes, absolutely. It makes sense to me.
And so you did high tech sales as well.
I did. I've done high tech sales for 20 years. So I started doing, I know that definitely calls my age out, but I started in 98 and, started doing sale. I really had no experience, walked into it, somehow talked myself into a job, and was kind of lucky enough to start my sales career. Y2K is coming. That was the big thing. And so
oh my God, that is hilarious.
To a certain operating system, and that worked out well for me. So that kind of kicked my career off and kind of went from there.
That is amazing. That is so funny. The Y2K, we all thought the world computers were going to short out.
Yep. The world was going to end. We didn't know what computers were going to do. They were all going to shut down, and we all held our breath while the clock turned to year 2000, and nothing happened.
Nothing happened
at all. So, which I feel like people must have known that was going to be the case, but what a great hype.
Yes, millions and millions of dollars were spent trying to prepare for Y2K, and nothing happened.
Yes, exactly.
Hilarious. Well, so it's so interesting that you're in high tech sales and I was in high tech sales. I think we'll have to have some war stories to share. Although I did all my tech sales sober, which was super awkward at times. So I'll be interested to hear what your experience was like. But before we jump into that, I want to ask you some lightning round questions because it's always fun to get some resources right up front. So what is your favorite recovery book? Do you have a favorite recovery book?
So for me, one of my favorite recovery books, and I read a lot. I really read anything that I could get my hands on when I knew that I needed to and wanted to get sober. But one of my favorites was a book called Moments of Clarity, and it's by Christopher Kennedy Lawson. So he is one of the Kennedys, but he had addiction, alcohol and addiction issues. And it's a book about when, why, and kind of how people got sober. So it's a compilation of a bunch of stories, which I love. So it's almost like a mini meeting in a book, which is great. You're just hearing someone's story, what that moment of clarity was for them and why they got sober and how it happened and, where they are now. So for me, that was really just inspiring and just helped me a ton.
That's great. I was just sharing with you before we started that I have a friend that is super hyper focused on that exact issue. So that is the perfect book recommendation. I can't wait to share that with everyone. Yeah. And do you have like a go-to mantra or quote that you live by?
So one of my, the mantra that I've always held near and dear to my heart is one that my dad always said. And that was adapt and overcome. And that's just been one that I carry with myself. It applies to anything, I think. So adapt and overcome is something that my dad just always said in a tough situation. And it's something that I just remind myself of when I'm in a situation that seems like it's endless or that's tough or just, it is uncomfortable, painful. It just really applies to any of it.
That's actually really brilliant. What a great lifestyle, adapt and overcome. That's such an empowering position. Thanks, Dad.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Dad. That was a good one.
That was a good one.
I thought you were so wrong about so many things, but you happened to be right.
On that one.
Right.
He's human, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a regular self-care recovery routine, daily or weekly?
So of course, it changed a little bit when the pandemic hit. Everything sort of turned upside down. But for me, I'm trying to meditate. I know that it's great for me. I sometimes just forget to do it, but
Right, me
trying
too.
to meditate at least 10 minutes a day. I definitely am, just I know how much fresh air and sunshine helps my mind, my body and my soul. So I try to incorporate that into my life every day. And then I try to incorporate some sort of meeting into my life. And whether that means talking with somebody in recovery or the way that we've had to adapt during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I was just doing sort of some online meetings and seeing if that worked. But typically before everything happened, I had meetings that I would go to a few times a week on a regular basis, not every day, but a few times a week. So I'm definitely looking forward to kind of getting into that again, where I'm able to be in a big group of people and hearing their stories, because that's always been a huge thing for me, hearing other people's stories of strength and recovery.
Right. Adapt and overcome stories. I love that.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
How are you adapting to pandemic? Well, first, let me ask you, we're referring, when we say meetings, you're like 12-step meetings, right?
Yes, yeah.
12-step meetings. We don't have to say which one. It's
Right,
a thin,
exactly.
it's a thin veil. We're respecting
Right,
the tradition.
right.
Don't say which one. Okay. But how are you adapting to online? Do you like online meetings?
They've been kind of weird. I mean, it's not the same, of course, just like anything else that we've done during the pandemic. We're all just doing Zoom a ton. It's funny because I'll jump into a meeting and I'll see other people that I know from recovery, so that's been cool. So I mean, they're good. I can't complain, but I'm adapting to it. I've adapted. I think in the beginning of the pandemic, for me, like so many others, I believe a lot of people felt this way. It was just surreal. It just was really a surreal experience. I was thinking, are we in a sci-fi movie? What is going on? How is this happening in our lifetime? But
So bizarre.
I think that I've gone through it with my family. There have been a lot of silver linings to what's been going on. I haven't really sat down with my kids and played board games like we did in the beginning of the pandemic. We've spent a lot more time together. We've done things that we just wouldn't have otherwise done. So I kind of have enjoyed the silver lining of it. But
It's great
that being said, I want it over with. I'm ready for it to be done.
Amen to that. No, I'm glad that you mentioned several linings. So many people are so focused on all the challenges of, the pandemic and things, but it's nice to hear about the silver linings once in a while, right? Like sort of,
Mhm.
it has caused a lot of people to sort of reevaluate a lot of things and spend time with people in a quality way that we weren't able to before. So I'm glad that you see some silver linings in that. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, what other choice do I have? I can kind of wallow in it, or I can say, all right, well, what are the good things that have been happening? I mean, it has been terrible on certain days, of course, but
Yeah.
looking at that way helps.
Good days and bad days. What's one thing you wish you knew when you first got sober?
I think it probably was mentioned to me before I got sober, but that life isn't going to be perfect. It's not going to take any of your other problems away. You're taking one problem away, and that's your addiction or your problems with alcohol. And so I think, that life isn't going to be perfect. You might feel great, you might be sober, but you're walking through, life is still going to show up, which people warn me about. Hey, life is still going to show up at your front door. You're still going to have to deal with things. Luckily, we get to walk through it sober, which is great. But that's probably one of the biggest things, that life will not be perfect.
I heard that, you'll feel better when you get sober, and you feel pain better, you
Yeah.
feel depression.
You go through all of it. Yeah.
You feel all of it, and that's normal, and that's okay, and we can survive all of that.
Exactly. Recognizing that you can really go through it, you can feel all of those things and that it's okay. You'll
Yeah,
still
it's
be okay.
okay.
You're gonna survive.
Right, yeah. And what do you do for fun?
So I live in a really cool town. I live in Santa Cruz, and we have the beach nearby. We have lots of hiking trails, biking trails. So I am huge on just getting out and enjoying nature and enjoying all those things that it has to offer. I'm not a surfer. I do not surf in the shark infested Santa Cruz waters. I don't. It's way too cold for me.
So cold.
Yeah. So I don't do that, but I do try to see the beach every day if I can. I love to mountain bike and I love to hike.
Mountain biking is amazing. I'm always afraid it seems like every friend I have who does mountain biking has broken their
Broken
bone
some.
at some point.
I'm way more careful now than I used to be. I mean, I think about the things that I used to do in my 20s, and it's amazing that I never broke anything. But now I'm just, like scooting down this, tiny little knoll, and not even like a mountain. It's like a grassy knoll or something, and I feel like I'm going down this huge thing. But
yeah,
I'm so much more careful now than I used to be because
age brings caution.
yes, exactly. I recognize that my bones are much more brittle now in this stage of my life, and I am not interested in breaking a leg or going over any handlebars.
Yeah, no thanks. Pass.
Yeah.
That's why I don't do CrossFit, among other reasons.
I know I'm not jumping up in that big block at that.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking.
I would catch a toe, fall over, and break my jaw or something. So
my trainer was having me do he said he wanted me to do box jumps, and I looked at him and I was like, if you miss, and a common injury is the shin thing. I was like, I am a professional. I am too damn old for. I do not need to do this. Right. Find a different exercise for me. Exactly. I am not doing that. Right, exactly. I'm so stubborn.
What's the modified version that I can do?
I know, right? Yeah. Is there a couch jump? I'll do that. I don't know.
That's a good one. That is a good one.
Right? Yeah. That's cushioned. Right. Do no damn box jump. Ridiculous. I'm such a pain in the ass. Okay, so thank you for playing along. I think these are some great resources. I can't wait to get that book, The Moments of Clarity, The Adapt and Overcome. I think that's probably going to be the theme of today's episode. But I want to hear your story. I want to hear like a little bit of what your childhood was like how you grew up, what was your family like, why you started drinking and using in the first place, because that's always interesting. And then what happened, like when did you decide that this was a problem and that you had to get sober and you really wanted to, and how you actually did it. Can't wait to hear. I'm just going to let you talk. I'm not going to interrupt you too much.
It's funny that I think I have looked back so much on why did I start drinking, or why did I start using, what was it that caused me to do that? I spent a lot of time, in therapy trying to figure out why. So, but my childhood was rocky. I grew up in an alcoholic home. My dad was an alcoholic. He was a functional alcoholic. So meaning he never lost his job. He held, he's great at what he did. And then, at night and on the weekends, he would just pound beers, which amazingly enough is what I ended up drinking also. But my parents were married, for almost 40 years by the time my dad passed away at a really young age of 64 because of alcoholism. And so they were together since they were 16 years old. I was an only child. I didn't have someone in my home that I could kind of hide with or run away with. It was all kind of on my shoulders to deal with. And so I, grew up wondering why I wasn't enough for my dad to stop drinking. My mom wasn't so much an alcoholic. She just, I think, was along for the ride. I do believe that she was a normie. I think that she, didn't need it. And she, today she doesn't drink at all, which is funny. So But yeah, my dad was, mentally abusive, not physically, but mentally abusive. I grew up with a lot of that. And but I also grew up with a lot of, once he was drinking, a lot of praise and a lot of, you're doing great, I love you. That was the only time that the praise came out. But you really never knew what you were going to get, and it also could turn ugly in a second, and he then could be mentally abusive for whatever reason. I could say something and it just would set him off. So I rebelled in certain ways of I didn't really drink a lot in high school. I did do other things. I tried drinking, but every time I did I would go and get out of control, and I was the one that would throw up every single time. I went, as whatever we were drinking, I did it, and I took it on with full enthusiasm. And so it always ended badly. I kind of tell the story. I had a best friend in high school that she and I think stole liquor from her parents' liquor cabinet and, filled it with water or something, the thing that kids do. We both ended up just getting completely just sick. And she had one of those trundle beds, and I woke up and I had peed, and I'm just putting it out there. I peed the bed, and I went, oh my, I'm like 14 or 15 years old. And I thought, what do I do? I mean, she'll be mad at me, and it's awful. So I flipped the mattress over, made the bed, pushed it back under. So that was, I look back now, she knows. I'm going, Robin, I got to tell you something about, but that's what happened to me when I drank. Those are the kinds of things that happened to me, which were really sort of foreshadowing how I would drink later in life. And so, in my 20s, I didn't really drink a ton. I ended up leaving home. I moved to Colorado just so I love the outdoors. And living in Colorado, it was sort of like it was where I found my drinking, for sure. I started, but it was something that everybody did. And so it was okay for me to drink as much as I wanted to. And, that was just what we did. After a day of skiing, we went down and, drank all night, and then got up the next day and did it all over again. So I met my husband in Colorado. He and I would just sort of party together, no big deal. We were in our 20s. We ended up moving to California in 98 when I started working at startups in the Silicon Valley. And it was sort of a mirror image of living in Colorado. It was completely okay to drink as much as you wanted to. In startups, it's almost encouraged. I mean, it's in everything that you do. And so after a while, my husband and I got married in 98. We had kids a few years later, 3 years later. And I feel like my drinking really kicked off when I became a mom. I feel like I would drink whenever I had a chance to do whatever I wanted to do. So I was with the kids all day. I stopped working for a bit. And I felt like I almost lost my identity in a way, because I had always been working. I'd always, that was where all of my friends were. And so I, kind of paired up with another mom who was also a startup salesperson and taking time off with her kids. And she and I would take care of the kids during the day. Our husbands would take care of them at night. They'd get home at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night. And she and I, not every night, but on occasion, would just go out and just get obliterated. And I noticed after a while that I was really looking forward to that. I was really looking forward to, when can I drink next? And, if we had a bottle of wine or beer or whatever it was, I had to watch how much I was drinking. And for me to even drink slowly around other people was too slow for me. And so, fast forward to my kids growing up and me kind of practicing that every night, I went back to work, was working for a startup. And again, it was encouraged. It was okay to drink. It was okay to drink at work. I mean, anyone could grab a beer out of the fridge at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, start drinking at their desk, and no one would look at you funny. It was okay. And so I ended up just drinking way too much. And, every time I drank, it was over the top. I could keep up with the guys. You probably remember this from working in tech. There are not a lot of women. So you're drinking around guys. I could drink like a man. I drank as if I was in a fraternity. It was just, I drank as much as I possibly could. And then getting up the next day to do, to go and be a responsible salesperson, making my number and just doing as well as I could, a functioning alcoholic, just like my dad, and drinking exactly like he did, drinking beer, loved beer, didn't care about cocktails, wasn't the, foofy cocktail person. I would just, pound beers just like he did. And after a bit, I recognized that I was waking up just with a ton of anxiety and a ton of shame and a ton of guilt. And that was happening every single day. And so it became this really vicious cycle where, I'm waking up with this horrible anxiety, and the only thing that would help it was drinking. I would wake up with these horrible hangovers, and the only thing that would quell them was drinking. And so I would kind of get through the day white knuckling it. But then I also recognized that I could work from home or, to do Zoom calls just like this with customers. And I did just as well. But I also found that I could sneak drinks in the morning. If I woke up with this horrible, just crippling anxiety and shame and guilt and hangover, that I could just run and grab whatever was left over, slim pickings from the night before, grab a beer and feel better right away. And so that became, something I swore I would never do, was drink alone. And I started drinking alone. I started, just drinking here and there during the day. I felt like I was doing better at my meetings. I felt like I was just more personal and it just made me that much better. And a friend of mine who, funny enough, lives in Idaho now, but he one day during a sales meeting we were having, I went to speak up during our sales meeting. I was at home and I was drinking, and I went to speak up, and what was going on in my mind was not what was coming out of my mouth. I sounded drunk. And he, sent me a quick message, a text or something, and he just said, "Shut up," and I knew that I had a problem, and no one called me on that meeting. No one said to me later, none of my higher ups took me aside and said, "We could tell that you were drinking when you tried to speak up during that meeting." No one ever said anything to me. My husband never took me aside and said, "You need to stop drinking or else." I asked, a friend of mine, "Do you think that I'm an alcoholic?" And she went, "No," but she was a drinking buddy, so I'm asking sort of these people that I kind of know they're not going to stick up for me to stop. So no one took me aside. No one said, it's too much, it's time to stop. There was no intervention. Nothing like that happened. Yet I was drinking during the day. I was, getting wasted. I was over the top sick. And I decided on my own, that this is not the life that I want to live. The way that my dad was, I swore I would never be like him, and I was exactly like him. And the truth of the matter is, women can't metabolize alcohol the same as men. Or if we might be able to drink like a man, but our bodies are not built like men's when it comes to breaking down alcohol. And we die much more quickly. We may drink a ton and things just shut down. And so I just decided on my own, this is just not the way I want to be. And so I did get sober for 4 months. I reached out to a friend that I knew was sober who took me to a meeting, and it helped me. And just talking to him really was helpful. Hearing somebody else's story was helpful to me again. And I was sober for 4 months. And after that, I decided, I know how to drink. I can now handle it. I don't need to stop. Maybe I'm not an alcoholic. And so I tried one more time. I tested it out, and I was okay for the first day. I woke up the next day and I went, "Okay, I'm all right. I don't have a hangover. I'm good. I can do this. I've just proven my theory that I'll be okay." Well, in the next day, I drank even more. And by day 3, I was just where I was 4 months before, And then that, I didn't get sober for another 9 months. And that 9 months was the worst kind of drinking that I'd ever done in my life. I drank more than I ever had. I drank in a way that I never knew that I could. And it was just really, it was terrible. And after 9 months, I said, you're going to die. You're going to die, or your life is just going to suck. And so I just decided on my own, something clicked for me, that I knew that I was unhappy. I knew I didn't want to wake up anymore with anxiety and gripping shame and guilt and remorse. And I didn't want to depend upon alcohol to help me get out of that feeling again and again and again. And regardless of how well I was doing better than ever in my career, which is funny. But I just decided, I can't do this anymore. And so I quit. I was still working for a startup, which was not easy I thought, how will they survive without me getting wasted with them? What will they do? So just my ego was like, they need me to hang with them. And so I ended up getting sober, and my friends knew I wasn't drinking anymore. I didn't tell them I was in any sort of recovery. I just said, I'm not drinking anymore. And, after a while, people just kind of knew I didn't do it. It was sort of weird for some people. They'd say, are you okay with me drinking around you? And really, I was okay with them drinking around me. And so that was almost 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years, May 6th this year. So that's really kind of, there's so much more to it, of course, but that's, in a nutshell, my story.
Wow, that's amazing. Almost 5 years. That's so great.
It's crazy to even think of. So
yeah. Did you get sober? Did you go to a 12-step program?
Yes. So funny enough, my I let my dad passed away, and my mom met somebody who happened to be in a 12-step program. He's been sober for at this point like 50 years. And so I reached out to my mom when I wanted to get sober, crying one night, just drunk, called her just saying, I just need help. And she said, why don't you call Ron? And Ron, her husband, helped me. So I called him, and he helped me with the 12-step program.
Your stepfather?
Yeah, he's now my stepfather. At the time he was not, but he is my stepfather now. So
wow, that's very cool.
Yep. Interestingly enough, we have growing up in a drunk household, and now surrounded by sobriety, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, that is amazing. Oh, man, your story is pretty intense. I mean, so this is an interesting thing. I work with a lot of like professional women who have that experience where they have their shit together at work.
Yeah.
But the drinking is just creating, I mean, you mentioned anxiety, guilt, and shame. That's what happens, right? Yeah. But it's so funny because when people ask their friends, they're asking people who are invested in you actually maintaining the status quo, right?
Exactly.
Isn't it weird how when you don't drink, other people, it really makes them look at their own drinking?
Yes. It's interesting because when I got sober, a lot of people would ask me, specific people would ask me over and over about getting sober. And I knew that what that meant was they were really looking at their own drinking.
Yeah. It's so funny that there's so much shame around quitting and not drinking. Yeah. Like it just is the polar opposite of reasonable. Alcohol is addictive. People do dumb things on it. It's bad for, I mean, there's really for the upside is very minimal. But I mean, people use it as a coping skill or a relaxation thing, but it doesn't work for all of us. Right. But it's so funny how we're so like it's not okay to be like sober, especially man in Silicon Valley working at all the startups. I remember there were times when I wrote an article about being at a startup and it was in a quarter. And, I was sitting in this cube across from my boss. They lined up shots on the top of my cube wall for everybody to come over and take shots.
Yep.
And I was just like, I don't belong here. I don't fit in. And it was just it separated me from the rest of my team. There were times and it was pretty challenging. How did you deal with that transition in the early period when you were at work?
It was really uncomfortable. It was like being out of my, not only are you kind of newly sober, which in and of itself can be, you have sort of this pink cloud initially, I think, but you also suddenly are thrust into this new life of kind of, you're just you're very vulnerable. You feel very raw, I think.
Mhm.
And for it was tough. It was really hard because, like you said, the shots are lined up. I mean, it's just drinking is it's part of the culture, and so it was uncomfortable. It was tough. It was hard. I felt out of place. I felt like I, I've never had a problem. It's funny because during the day at work, I had no problem talking with people and having normal conversations and having the gift of gab with customers or whatever it was. And just, the minute 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock or whatever time it was that alcohol was suddenly being served, I all of a sudden felt weird and out of place. And so the people I had, everything to talk about with an hour ago, I then felt strange talking to while they had a drink in their hand and I didn't. And so I dealt with it I dealt with it really by, it sounds cliche, but dealing with it one day at a time. I really had to do that. I couldn't I couldn't kind of future trip and go, it's almost the end of the quarter in 2 weeks. And I know that there's going to be a whole bunch of drinking. But just after a while, it became easier, just like anything else, I think, with practice,
Absolutely.
it
Yeah.
became easier over time. It just did.
Yeah. It's awkward at first, but that's true for anything that's new,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
anything that's new is awkward at first, and then you grow accustomed to it, and then it becomes second nature. But
Exactly.
don't you feel like being sober is sort of like there's like this coming out process? Like it's like a continued coming out process. And
Yes.
we do it with friends, new friends, we do it at new jobs. I was in the startup circuit too, so I went to many different startups, which is common in sales, right?
Right.
2-3 years at any one place, then you kind of move on. And sharing that with people, you kind of get a sense for who you can tell, and what you specifically say. Did you have sort of like a go-to response? Did you just treat it casually? Did you have like a specific strategy to handle that? What was your way of dealing with that?
I'm kind of the type of person that I don't necessarily have things planned, which is kind of fine. I have certain things planned with work, but I, I'm kind of off the cuff. If I'm having a conversation with somebody, it comes up, then I just kind of I apply it to who I'm talking to, and
Right.
like what their situation is and what will work in our conversation. And so it just might come up casually, and I'll say, "Oh, I've been sober for 4 months. I've been sober for 9 months. I've been sober for 12 months." And then a conversation kind of just starts. But I didn't a lot of times say that I was in recovery. And I think you mentioned just a little bit earlier about there being a lot of shame around that, which is something I did not expect. That's one of the things I do wish that someone sort of that I knew getting sober, is that feeling shame about being in recovery is a really common thing that I did not know was common. I looked it up. Of course, I tried to research it. I'm going, what is going on with me? Why do I feel this sort of shame around getting sober when really I should feel proud about what I've done and what I'm accomplishing, for myself and for people around me. But it's a really common thing that people go through. And so I wish that that was something that I knew beforehand and was sort of equipped and ready to deal with that part of it, because I felt like I was hiding and almost living a double life. I didn't mention to people that I went to meetings. And so if I felt like I was almost lying, or just like I
Mm.
said, living a separate life. But there was also that shame around being in recovery that I went through. I'm feeling a lot better about it now, but it was
Okay.
definitely a part of what I was going through in the beginning. I felt embarrassed that I
Right.
maybe needed help, or, that I was that far gone or something, that I had to um, go outside of myself to get help to solve this problem.
Yeah, there is a lot of shame around not being able to drink anymore, like having a problem with alcohol. There is all that shame, but
Right.
I have just come to, this realization that, I don't talk about my sex life,
Right.
right? Like you don't have to say everything to everybody. Right.
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean that I'm lying about it. It's just not appropriate.
Right.
Right. Like I don't want to get into this. There are certain people I just don't want to get into the conversation with
Yes.
because I don't feel like they're in a place that they understand,
Right.
or really just that I care that much. It's like there's just certain people I do not care to go there with, people that are judgmental, or
Yep.
they're not looking to understand, especially anyway. So judgy people, things like that. I don't talk about. But
I
yeah, it's
agree. Yeah, you feel it out, and
yeah,
trust your instinct, I think, is always a good
yeah.
good mantra.
That is a good mantra. Trust your instincts. Yeah. And you don't have to feel ashamed about needing to ask for help.
Exactly. You really don't.
Super legit.
Yep.
Um, and I'm so sorry about your dad. You said he died at 64.
He did, and interestingly enough, I mean, he knew that he was going to die at an early age. Even when I was a kid, he would talk to me about really adult things, in terms of, hey, if I'm ever on life support, which he was at the end of his life, if I'm
Wow.
ever on life support, pull the plug. I don't want to be a vegetable. I don't want to be in that situation. So we had those conversations that you think that you'd have as an adult, but he talked to me about those things as a kid. And so I always knew that, hey, if this happens, he doesn't want to be a vegetable. And so he would have been a vegetable if we kept him alive. And, you know, it, uh, it doesn't make it any easier thinking that you know that your dad's going to probably die at an early age, but the way that he lived his life, there was no possible way he was going to live to be, anything considered to be a
Old.
long,
Yeah.
yeah, old.
Were you sober when he passed away?
I was not, and my drinking became a lot worse when he died. It
Yeah.
definitely, skyrocketed. I think in a weird way, and I've told other people this, that in a weird way, and again, here's like a strange silver lining to my drinking. Um, Getting to that point where I drank exactly like him almost helped me understand um,
Oh,
what was going on with him, and it also helped me understand that it had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with how much he loved me, or why wasn't I enough to help him to get to stop, or something like that. It just helped me realize that I had nothing. It had nothing to do with me or anybody else that he loved, or that loved him. It just had to do with him and what he was going through. And so in a way, that really did help me. I never needed to forgive him, but it helped
mhm.
me get to that point where I really had this true understanding.
Just the compassion and empathy that I'm hearing that you had for your father. What
Yeah,
a what a blessing though, that to realize it had nothing to do with me.
I know. I mean,
That's a blessing.
and that's the biggest thing is, one of the biggest things for me in sales was also always, what makes you a great salesperson? Well, it's always been empathy. If you don't have empathy for what someone's going through, you're not going to be able to do a good job. And so um, that was always my silver bullet in sales. And I it was a huge thing to end up having empathy for what he went through, and just compassion, like you said.
Compassion. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't escape the same measuring stick that you judge others by, right? So
Yeah.
if we have judgment towards other people, we also have that same judgment to ourselves. That's why, like Dr. Brene Brown talks about vulnerability, and she says the antidote to shame is empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Love that.
her, and I love her. She's got a TED talk on vulnerability. I
Oh
just
yeah.
love it. It's great.
It's so good. Yeah. I know she has a podcast now too. I haven't heard it yet, but
I
we'll
haven't
keep.
either, but just everything she says that comes out of her mouth, I'm going, can we just have lunch? Can we just sit down? Like, wouldn't you just love to sit down with her and just
I
have a
would.
conversation? I mean, I think that you would learn so much in a, 45-minute lunch or something that would just change your life.
She seems super fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's hilarious. I love her. My kindred spirit. So tell me some of the things that helped you the most getting sober. I mean, you obviously you worked the 12 steps. Did you get a sponsor and do all the writing exercises and all that?
I did everything that I was told to do, because the
Me
first
too.
time I didn't. The first time I was like, I don't really need to do this, this, and this. I would just sort of be very selective on what I did. So the next time I went, you better listen to what people were telling
Half
you.
measures avail us nothing.
Yes, yes. So I did everything. I did 90 meetings in 90 days. I got a sponsor. I found someone that helped me, work the steps. I wrote, I, journaled. I did, I did everything that I was told to do. I didn't try to reinvent the wheel. And, that's one of the biggest things that helped me, but also, just reading about other people's stories, or just listening to other people's stories, however you do it. For me, I think that was one of the things I've always loved about meetings, is that I've listened to other people's stories, and regardless of how sort of different they are to mine, it's still my story to a T in so many ways. And so that's always been just the biggest help for me to just, I don't know what it is about hearing other people's stories that has helped me, but that's the biggest thing for me.
Isn't that interesting? I've always found that even though the circumstances are different, the feelings are all the same.
Mm-hmm.
The feelings are always the same. It's always like guilt and shame and like surprise at how messed up we are.
Right.
But finding our people, they're like, they can say, oh, I did that too, or I felt that way too. Or it's like, oh, I'm not terminally unique. I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. I mean, maybe we are a little crazy, but we kind of found a new normal in this community of people who get it. And
Yep.
suddenly it's like we belong and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, and that's what I loved about, we're lucky here in Santa Cruz. There are so many meetings.
Yeah.
It's a huge recovery community, but I just loved the fact that in recovery, could meet somebody, and within 3 minutes, we could be having just this deep conversation that would take me years to have with somebody that I met just on this, just in any other situation. And
Yeah.
I didn't ever feel judged. I felt like I could say all of these bad things that I felt like I did that nobody else ever did. Or, I felt like I was so unique, like you said.
Yeah.
And just, within minutes, I could say, well, guess what I did? And they're like, so I did the same thing. So that part I love. And these are people that maybe I would never, we might not otherwise ever connect in, the real world, I guess I would call it.
Isn't
But
that funny how we instantly have like these deep conversations? When I
yeah.
first got sober, it was like suddenly I was incapable of small talk.
Yeah, I just cut right to it.
We're all talking about like our the worst things that we ever did.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, exactly.
And laughing about it too. I
Right.
remember, going to meetings for the first time and people were laughing at the most horrific things. And I was like, we are a bunch of weirdos,
Right.
because you see new people come in and somebody says something horrible and we all start laughing. The look of horror, shock and horror on their
Yes.
face is priceless. And I'm just like, oh, just you wait, sweetie. It'll be fine. You'll
Right. And that's
totally
like
get
when I tell the
it.
story of me peeing the bed, the trundle bed, and flipping the mattress and pushing it back under, I'm going, look, that's not even the worst of the stories that I've got. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So, but I
Oh
mean,
my
I don't have a
gosh.
problem saying it, because that happened, that happened to me. And it just,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't drinking.
Yeah, I mean, I was a puker. I threw up all the time, and I
Oh,
used to make a joke out of it. I was like, if I didn't have splash marks on my shoes the next morning, it wasn't a good time.
yeah.
And people who don't get my kind of crazy are horrified by that, but everybody else laughs.
Yeah, I was
Everybody
such
else.
a puker. I was such a puker. It was awful.
I mean, I don't know how tall you are. I can't tell it, but I'm short. I'm small, but I used to be able, I had such a high threshold I built up quite a tolerance where I
Me
used to
too.
be able to drink men twice my size under the table. But yeah, I was always puking. I mean, because it's poison. So there's that.
Right. Yeah. Your body's like, no, no, get it out. Yeah.
Stop it.
No, I know.
Stupid.
I did the same. I could drink, like I said, I could drink like a man. It was
Yeah.
like I was pledging a fraternity. I mean, what am I
Oh
doing?
yeah.
I'm a taller person, but I'm not a huge person. And I had such a tolerance, and
Yeah.
it built so quickly. I mean, it was,
Yeah. That's not something to be proud of. That means you're ingesting a lot of poison.
well, I remember, coming home one time, I was in my 20s, and I had plans with my mom the next day after hanging out with a fellow drinker. And I was all puffy and I'm going, why am I so puffy? And my mom went, you're hungover. Like, that's the effects of alcohol on your face.
Yeah.
And she said, just be careful. I mean, I remember like this, like it was yesterday. She said, just be careful because it's so easy that you're having a few beers today, but before you know it, you can be drinking a six pack. And I went, a six pack. I mean, yeah, if you're drinking a six pack, you do have problems. I'm so sure that would happen to me, Mom. And I mean, a six pack was nothing to me when I was drinking, but
Yeah. I mean,
when I'm in my 20s, I went, that's so much. Ew, who would be drinking a six pack anyway?
ew.
And here I am going, mastering the art of beer bongs, a few years later.
Yeah. Super attractive. And it doesn't right.
Yeah.
Also doesn't help when you're being encouraged to drink at work, which is not, it's just very commonplace in Silicon Valley. I wonder if that's that way, across the country, but I do feel like salespeople sort of have like, a tendency to be heavy drinkers. But it's so funny how, like, if you're a drinker, we tend to surround ourselves with other people that are drinkers, and so we think, oh, in this industry or this, this is the norm here. And then I talk to other people in different industries, and they tell me, oh, it's super common in this industry. And then I started to connect the dots, and I'm like, oh, it's because we're drinkers. It's not the industry that we're in, although salespeople do drink a lot.
That's a really good point. I mean, I'm sure if there was a study done on it, they would say, no, that's actually not, the correlation is not that, it's this.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And of course, we're not going to surround ourselves with the people who aren't going to be drinking just as heavily as we are. We're going to surround ourselves with people, like-minded people who, do exactly what we do and pat us on the back when we do it just like them, or even better. So that makes sense. Yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah. We start to lose all perspective when we start to think that that's normal.
Yes.
It's not normal.
Exactly.
It doesn't even matter. I mean, what is normal anyway? It doesn't matter. It's just not good. It's not good for you.
It's just not good. It's
just not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I could talk to you all day, obviously, and I'm so glad that we're both sort of in the same industry, so we'll have to stay close. I want everybody to read your blog. So you have this blog. I think you're in the process of changing it, but you're permagrin, and I love that because that's what sobriety is like. Overall, it's like I am way happier sober than I was drinking, right? I've learned how to manage the negative feelings and stay mostly happy. Has that been your experience too?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, real life has shown up. And so it's not always like, oh, I'm so happy because I'm sober, but oh my God, is it a difference? It's night and day. There's just I don't wake up with fear, guilt, anxiety, shame. I mean, that alone is, I attribute not drinking to my happiness.
Man, that anxiety, that is terrible. I know a lot of people really struggle with anxiety, but alcohol is not a good coping skill.
No, absolutely not. And so yeah, I did start my blog. I do write about my own experiences with alcoholism. I write about my childhood and alcoholism. It is, yourpermagrin.com, and that name is self-explanatory once you kind of understand my story. The blog is Sober in Santa Cruz. It's really easy to find. And, I just sort of say, I just lay it out, I just talk about what I've been through and things that I relied upon to get me where I am today. So thank you so much for having me today. It's been really, really fun.
Yeah.
Sort of like a mini meeting,
It
really.
is like a mini meeting. That's kind of the intention, especially, I started this 4 years ago. And so I was thinking, oh, maybe, I traveled a lot for work, and I thought, oh, well, maybe this will be helpful for people as they're traveling or whatever. And it's being downloaded in 63 countries now. So you're going to be
Amazing.
broadcast all over the place. But yeah, it is like a mini meeting. And I'm so grateful that you were able to just to be so transparent and talk about, what it was really like. And I think that's what people really connect with is just, I know that people are really connecting with you. I know your blog is doing well. And it's just that transparency, that just brutal honesty that I feel like, when someone speaks from the heart, I feel like that's the language that crosses all boundaries. It doesn't matter if it's print or, across Zoom. It's like people feel it when you speak from the heart, and that really comes through. So I just thank you so much for this time. And I look forward to watching your blog grow some more. And please come back at any time when you have anything else to say. I'm your girl.
I would love to. Thank you so much. It's been awesome.
Have a great day. We'll talk real soon.
Thanks. You too.